In this video, we'll talk about how to write a repeating decimal as a fraction. So let's take a look at a few examples. Let's say we have the repeating decimal 0.8 repeating. So this bar right here tells us which values actually repeat in the decimal. So for example, if we were to write this decimal out, it would be equal to 0.8888, and it would just go on and on and on because the bar is above the 8, which is the value that keeps repeating. So how can we write this repeating decimal as a fraction? Well, it turns out that there's a cool trick we can use where we can say, let's just define some variable, let's call it n, and let's let n be equal to the repeating decimal, so 0.888. We need to ask ourselves, how can we move this decimal place beyond the repeating bar? Well, if we multiply this by 10, that would move it beyond the bar, and it would be 8.8888. So 10n, if we were to multiply n by 10, that would be equal to 8.8888, on and on and on. And then what we can do is we can say, well, what do we need to subtract from this 8.8888 in order for all of these repeating 8s to go away or to be subtracted away? Well, notice that if we subtract an n, we said that n, we're going to let that be equal to 0.888. So on this right-hand side, we could say, let's subtract an n, which would be subtracting 0.8888, on and on and on. And when we perform this subtraction, notice all of these 8s would be subtracted away, and we would just be left with 8 minus 0. So on this left-hand side, we have 10n minus 1n, so 10 minus 1, that's just 9. So we would have 9n is equal to, on the right-hand side, remember, we're just left with 8 minus 0, so that's 8. And then we need to get n all by itself. So the way we can do that is we can divide by 9. Because when we divide by 9, these 9s will cancel out. And we can divide by 9 on this right-hand side as well. So we'll be left with n is equal to 8/9. And this is our final answer. This is how we can write 0.88888 repeating as a fraction. And what you'll find is if you punch in 8 divided by 9 into a calculator, you'll get 0.888. So you can confirm your answer in that way. Okay, let's try another example. Let's say we have 1.47 repeating. So if we were to write this out, here's what it would look like. 1.474747. So the 4 7s just keep repeating over and over and over again. And we know that because the bar is over the 4 and the 7. So how can we write this 1.47 repeating as a fraction? Well, for now, let's just ignore this 1 and let's just focus on the decimal portion. How can we move the decimal place beyond the repeating bar? Well, we'd have to move it twice. So if we multiply by 10, we get to move the decimal place once to the right. If we multiply by 100, we get to move it one more to the right. So that would allow us to move beyond the repeating bar. So if we say that some variable n is equal to this 0.4747 repeating over and over, then if we multiply this by 100, 100n would be equal to 47.474747, on and on and on. And then we want to ask ourselves, well, is there something that we can subtract from this 47.4747 to get rid of these repeating 4 7s? Well, recall we said that we're going to let n be equal to 0.47 repeating. So if we just subtracted a single n, that would be subtracting 0.474747. And notice that when we perform this subtraction, all of these values after the decimal would go away. They would be subtracted away. So let's see what we get. 100n minus 1n. 100 minus 1 is just 99. So we have 99n is equal to, on the right-hand side, we're just left with 47 minus 0. So that's 47. And once again, we want to get the n all by itself. So how do we do that? We can divide by 99. So these 99s will cancel out. And we can also divide the right-hand side by 99. So our final answer is n is equal to 47 over 99. Now we want to see, is there a way to simplify this fraction? It doesn't look like it because 47 is a prime number. So our final answer, remember, we had a 1 out front here. So our final answer is actually going to be 1 and 47/99. That's how we can write 1.47 repeating as a fraction. Okay, let's try one more example. Let's say we have 0.452 repeating. So notice that the bar is only above the 5 and the 2. So these are the only values that are repeating. So if we were to write this out, here's what it would look like. 0.452, 52, 52, on and on and on like that. So the 5 and the 2 are the values that repeat. So how can we write this repeating decimal as a fraction? Well, we're going to use the trick again where we say, let's just define some variable n. And we will let that be equal to the 0.4525252. How can we move this decimal place beyond the repeating bar? Well, we said if we multiply by 10, that would move it once to the right. If we multiply by 100, we would move it once more to the right. And if we multiply by 1,000, we would be able to move this decimal place beyond the repeating bar. So 1,000n would be equal to 452.525252 over and over again. And once again, we want to say, what can we subtract to get rid of these repeating values after the decimal place? Well, if we subtracted just one n, we would be subtracting 0.4525252. So notice that if we were to perform that subtraction, these 5 2's wouldn't quite cancel out because the values after the decimal place are not the same. But notice that if we instead subtracted 10n, well, 10n, we would be moving the decimal place once to the right. So 10n would be equal to 4.525252. And notice that if we perform this subtraction, then all of the values after the decimal place would cancel out. They would all go away, and that's exactly what we want. So if we do 1,000n minus 10n, 1,000 minus 10, that's 999. So 999n is equal to, and on the right-hand side, we're left with 452 minus 4, that's 448. And remember, we want to get n all by itself, so we can do that by dividing by 990, so that these 990s cancel out. And on the right-hand side, we can also divide by 990. So we're left with n is equal to 448 over 990. But notice that both the numerator and the denominator are even numbers, so that means we could at least divide them by 2 to try to simplify this fraction. So if we divide 448 divided by 2, that's 224. And if we divide 990 by 2, that turns out to be 495. And it turns out that we can't simplify this fraction any further than that. So this is our final answer. And if you were to punch in 224 divided by 495 into a calculator, you would indeed get 0.45252, and the 5 2's would repeat over and over again. So that's how we can write this original repeating decimal as a fraction.